He changed the sport in every way. He was style, power, and different.
Oh, he's got the shakes going and everything.
Woo! Pep's a strong kid, you know, and back in the day, like even that young, like 16, kid was just a powerhouse.
I was like, man, he's different, you know? I was like, I gotta ski with this kid, basically. This has nothing really to do with skiing, but this is where I was raised. We had a couple of yurts kind of up on the hill, and then that looked down into a couple of greenhouses, and you know, my family was they were organic herb farmers back in the day. So these hands have picked a lot of basil.
But only through time did I learn more and more about where he grew up, the unique place, Mount Ashland that I got to ski at, that whole area, and just a unique approach that I think has a lot to do with who he is and his approach to riding and his style overall.
My mom she'd skied a bit as a kid, not really as a kid actually, kind of more as a teenager, and throughout her college years she went over to Europe and traveled around and ended up skiing a lot there. You know, passes were free for kids up until I was like 8 or 9. And so that was kind of an easy no-brainer to get the kids out of the house. You know, I had all these big dreams of all these places like Colorado and Jackson and Mammoth. They were all like these places that I couldn't even really fathom what was going on there.
Pep's a mellow dude. He was, you know, his parents did a great job of raising him, I would say. You know, they taught him what real values are.
He was always cool and chill. And I mean, that's what I knew about Pep. That was it. And he went to Steamboat.
So I didn't know if I wanted to do moguls or race, so I was fortunate enough to convince my parents to send me up to mogul camp up in Whistler, and a race camp that just happened to be out in Bend, so it was a pretty close drive for me. After the mogul camp up in Whistler, I just had like so much fun, and it was such like a rad challenge for me. So yeah, then I signed up for skiing moguls competitively at boarding school.
And did you meet Tanner at the first mogul camp you went to, or was that?
Yeah, actually no. I think it was the second.
Our other roommate, we saw this fucking name, Pep Fugis. And I was like, phew, that's a weird name.
That was when Tanner was ripping bumps, and then he'd go over and, you know, throw some rad tricks on the tables.
But me and Pep were always about doing backies and the moguls and sevens, and I remember me and him basically getting off the T-bar and like going into the moguls and like skiing 2 moguls, jumping over 3 of them, pressing the backside and launching into the bumps and then just cutting out.
After that, we kind of kept in touch, and he started going to all the US Opens and all those other contests, and he'd always be like, dude, when are you gonna switch over? You know, come free ride.
And I think having that structured upbringing, education, approach to skiing moguls laid the foundation to then take his skills, his talents, his style, and just move in a totally different direction.
I was able to kind of work my magic and like go to Parkosaurus. Yeah, like after that, Tanner was like, wow, why don't you come up to Mammoth and hang out and shred for a couple weeks? And kind of coincidentally, Oakley was doing a photo shoot up there.
We were shooting with Oakley in Mammoth, and I kept seeing Pep hit all the same jumps, and he was smashing it. I was like, this kid's really good. Like, this kid's actually really good. That's when I took notice of Pep.
Pat Mack came up to me. He's he was like the general marketing manager at that time. It's like, oh, you want to shoot with us for the rest of the day? And so I shot with him for the rest of the day. And by the end of the day, he asked me if I wanted to ride for Oakley, and I was like, hell yeah, dude, sign me up.
It's not really an answer just to say that he had like good style or whatever. It's such a lame fucking answer to say, oh, he brought like style. It's like, what is that? Everyone brought style. Like, he did new tricks and he did them fast and he did them good, and you look at them now and they still look good. I think that's a really true testament to something being good, is if you can look at it 5-10 years later and it still holds up.
He changed the sport in every way. I thought in Happy Days he changed the sport. He was doing these quarter pipe hits in Whistler and did zero spin, you know, like straight up, straight down, like air to fakie. And I thought at that time, I was like, everyone else is just spin to win. And he was style, power, and different.
That whole generation with like Tanner and Pep and Yoon and all those guys, they were so fucking good. It was insane. And every year they got better, and every year they were doing new things, and it was a pretty exciting time, and it was fun to watch at the time.
This is my first powder cover. Our first lift ride, we get up to the top and we see all these cliff bands, like just a short hike. So I hike up there, and what do you know, a ski patrol comes and busts us, pulls our passes. We're like, all right, well, let's make the best of this run. One of the better cork threes off a cliff I've ever done. It's probably one of the first ones that was done, but there's no like video evidence of it, so maybe it never happened.
There's the breakthrough, 1242.
Oh yeah, this was like my shining season. Got the cover and had a pretty like outstanding part.
I remember seeing it and being like, man, that was just so well put together. Like the music was really dynamic, and Pep was just charging, and Poor Boys captured that, you know what I mean? It's hard, sometimes it's hard to do that, to capture somebody who's pushing it that hard, but that segment definitely, you know, showed how much he was pushing the sport and pushing himself, and how different he was than everyone else.
The picture on the back's kind of funny. This is like actually the first contest I won out in Europe.
You guys, check it out! That's huge! Oh my God, that was massive!
But yeah, this was like a standout year for me.
And Pep had the craziest year that year out of any skier, still to this day, you know. People go out and they get it done this day and age, but it just doesn't have a rawness that I feel like Pep had.
Pep's the man!
Yeah, he goes big all the time.
Stoked on Pep right now.
Yeah, Pep. Yeah, Pep.
For me, his 720 was like something that sticks out in my mind. That was the biggest 720 I've ever seen in my whole life. I don't think I'll ever see one that big again. I haven't seen one that big since.
This is a pretty kind of an ironic photo. Just because this was shot in Chamonix. This is like the extreme skiing mecca of the world. And we're at the library sliding a ledge. And I didn't even go up the Gita Midi while I was there.
Because those back-to-back fives, you're right, in 1242, like, to be able to go like 100 feet and do both way fives and mirror them and stomp like he did, like at that time, you know, and like you're just coming into the game.
And this was a K2 ad of like Big Five from the 1242 year. I remember I was out with JF, Lou, and Vinny, and they were just like, they didn't even really understand what had happened.
Pep definitely crushed people's worlds. When you're at the top of the game and some kid comes in and absolutely crushes it, it's like when Pep came out back then, it was like, oh my God, I'm gonna have to be powerful and jump off massive cliffs and land backwards.
Because at that point, he did that 180. 10 seconds before he did that 180, if you were gonna ask anybody in the world if you could do a 180 off of something that big, you're gonna laugh. Into something pretty much like a flat landing almost too. Like off a 40-footer, and he just stomps the piss out of it. Like, we didn't think like that back in the day.
What was funny is that, you know, I was kind of supposed to have last part, you know, if that's the way things work, because usually, like, you know, the best segment gets last part, but I didn't for some kind of political reasons.
I never had meetings with Oakley about Yoon being the closer or Tanner being the opening. It never once came up. They were as core as we were. We were all stoked. We thought we put everything perfect. Yoon had an amazing segment too. He just didn't have a segment that changed skiing.